Recording, share screen. Share screen. Taking a while to load. And it didn't load. Oh, there we go. Okay. Give me a thumbs up if you can see a document that says Meditation, Judaism, and Self-Mastery. All right, thank you, Edith. We're going to continue our study of the Jewish idea of enlightenment, which Rabbi Kaplan talks about extensively as a goal of meditation. As you know, he talks about all forms of meditation, and they have different goals. The goal of one form of meditation is enlightenment, or we call it Ruach HaKodesh. Interestingly enough, we'll get rid of that G there. And he alluded, he actually identified different midot, different personality characteristics that need to be developed through the way you live in order to achieve Ruach HaKodesh, which is a very fascinating idea, which is different than our usual idea of meditation. This is meditation in your daily life. So it's more advanced than just sitting on a cushion or just sitting or standing or even moving meditation. But it's where meditation should be. And because it's more complicated, it becomes a more advanced form of meditation with a more advanced benefit, in this case being Ruach HaKodesh or enlightenment. So we're going to take a pretty deep dive into what this is. And as is his usual practice, he doesn't go into a lot of detail into the how-tos and the wherefores. So we're using additional sources. One of them is an essay called Soul of Fire, A Theory of Biblical Man by Shav, who produced some excellent essays and interpretations of Tanakh. And one reason why I find his work so useful is because he has a time-proven effective method of understanding Tanakh, which is to understand how words are used, understanding the cultural and sociological and historical and legal context of different words. So he has a very sophisticated understanding of Tanakh. And we're going to continue with him today. Just as a review, Rabbi Kaplan mentioned to us that in his structure of the soul, there's three parts. There's the nefesh, there's the ruach, and there's the neshama. Didn't elaborate too much on that. Fortunately, Shav does. And as you'll see, as we mentioned last week, he takes it a step further. Here's a summary of his part one in the essay, which we covered last week. He says, in what follows, I intend to show that the original Hebrew terminology was both distinct and consistent, and that the very absence of visible souls in the Hebrew Bible points to a more commanding alternative conception of man's inner being, meaning that he, as you recall, Tanakh does not come right out and say, this is what happens when you die, and this is the structure of the soul. It doesn't come out. It makes us work for it. It makes us learn. Okay. And he contrasted it against the Greeks and against the Christians, and he says, we need to peel away the surface understanding of things to understand what the Torah is telling us. Okay. I also intend to show that while the Bible does not uphold the soul-body dichotomy, which most critics have considered prerequisite to a belief in the persistence of the soul after death, it does demonstrate the presence of a four-element structure of both matter and spirit that supports a belief in life eternal. So he is reminding us that this whole idea about body and soul is not a Jewish idea. It's a Greek idea. If you recall, he mentioned last week. So when you say I have a body and the soul goes into it, okay, that's not us. Okay. We have a 4-element structure. This structure has been either overlooked or confused with Aristotle's schema to the point where the spiritual implications of the biblical usage have gone undiscovered. So once again, we have this dilemma, our spiritual tradition has kind of got pushed to the wayside. Rabbi Kaplan said that's exactly what happened to our spiritual practice of meditation. And here Ethan Shav is echoing that and saying our spiritual philosophy or metaphysical philosophy that is sophisticated, that talks about the soul, that also got pushed aside in favor of non-Jewish ideas. So we are picking up the reins of him and picking up the reins of Rabbi Kaplan and saying, no, we got to get back on track. What is the Jewish point of view here? And he wrapped up last week by saying, thus scholars searching the Hebrew Bible for signs of an interest in the afterlife have been looking through the wrong intellectual lenses and have therefore missed the Hebrew Bible's profound teaching concerning man's constitution and destiny. Yeah, we're going to get into afterlife, and it's not going to be what you think. To gain access to this metaphysical worldview of the ancient Israelite sages, we must stop looking for a landscape of heaven under the light of our preconceived expectations. In ancient Israelite philosophy, the netherworld is to be understood, not imagined. The divine soul is to be realized, not seen. This is an active thing. This is based on our experience. The Jewish point of view is based on experience. So if we have a metaphysical philosophy based on our experience, then those people that are teaching us, those people that have interpreted Tanakh accordingly must be very spiritually advanced to pick this stuff out. So we have quite a legacy from very spiritually advanced people here. Unfortunately, their teachings were sidelined and pushed away from the mainstream, but we're going to recapture that. Okay, so now let's go to the essay, and we'll look at part 2. Okay, I figured out how to enlarge this, so I trust it's okay. Give me a thumbs up if you can see that. Good, okay. This is what he says in part 2. The first step in parsing the Hebrew Bible's idea of man is to clarify the text's view of the cosmos. We have a cosmology. Any notion of souls in heaven already invokes this link. In antiquity, the picture of the cosmos defined the framework of reality. It stretched from the realm of the gods to that of the demons, and its governing order commanded all natural law in the phenomenological world. For the Hebrew Bible, the cosmic picture is defined by a 4-element hierarchical construct. Surprising to those familiar with the model solely from Greek thought, a version of the ancient theory of the 4 elements, earth, water, wind, and fire, and this is not based on the rock group, by the way, from the 60s, debuted in the ancient Israelite kingdom before Aristotle, or probably this other philosopher. All right, so we had it first. Most easily, the 4 primal elements can be discerned in successive verses in the opening chapter of Ecclesiastes. This reference will soon help illuminate earlier biblical sources. So he's telling us that a very sophisticated metaphysical philosophy is inherent in the text of Tanakh. 4 dimensions, earth, water, wind, and fire. And to start us off, he's looking at text. And in this case, he's looking at Kohelet, book of Ecclesiastes, quoting, "A generation goes and a generation comes, but the earth forever stands." That's a reference to the earth. The sun rises and the sun comes and hastens to the place where it rises. That's fire. Hold a second. Who has ascended into heaven? Fire again, and descended. Who gathered the wind in his fist? Wind. Who bound the water in a garment? Water. Who established all the ends of the earth? Earth. So his technique here is to say, wait a minute, we've got sets of pasukim, sets of verses that describe the cosmos and God's creation of the cosmos. And in this set, we see the four elements: earth, water, wind, and fire. And then he goes to Tehillim. And what does he say? Then the earth shook and trembled. The foundations of the hills also quaked and were shaken because he was angry. Reference to earth. Smoke went up from his nostrils and devouring fire from his mouth. Fire. Coals were kindled by it. He bowed the heavens coming down. Our fell under his feet. Fire in heaven. And he rode upon a cherub and flew. He flew upon the wings of the wind. Wind. He made darkness his secret place, his dwelling the dark water, and rained clouds of the skies. Here's a reference to water. Okay. And he goes on, these and other references show how early the four element scheme was manifest in ancient Israelite writings. Indeed, the very first two verses of the Bible invoke these same elements. There you go. In the beginning, God created the heaven, fire, and the earth, and the wind of God hovered upon what? The face of the water. Once again, the four elements of our whole cosmology, right at the beginning. This primordial blueprint can be discerned in the subsequent unfolding of creation. For the first six days comprise two sets of three, each opening with a distinct element. Days 1 and 4 both start with light or fire. Days 2 and 5 are initiated by water, and days 3 and 6 both stem from the earth element. Thus, quoting, in 6 days the Lord made heaven, fire, and earth, the sea, and all that is in them. Later we will learn why, he says, the wind element may only reappear in the story of Adam and Eve. Okay. So now he's looking at the further into the creation story and showing us once again how these four elements are discussed and they interact. He goes on. From Genesis, we also learn the biblical hierarchy placing water bottommost. This cosmic order is reiterated in the Ten Commandments, where it states, you shall not make for yourself a carved image or any likeness of. Wait a minute. Skipped a page. Hold on. Okay, sorry about the delay. Just give me a second here. We're going to have to keep it at this size because otherwise it skips a page. I got to figure that out, but bear with me. Okay. 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 From Genesis, we also learn the biblical hierarchy placing water bottommost. This cosmic order is reiterated in the Ten Commandments, where it states, "You shall not make for yourself a carved image, any likeness of anything that is the heaven above, fire, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the water underneath the earth." So here then are the biblical spheres of the cosmos. Fire as heaven is on top, then a circling wind, below it the green earth, and underneath the primal waters of the abyss, called to home, that we have the water. So even in the Ten Commandments, when it's talking about not making a likeness, it's using that same structure. Okay. This view, of the cosmos is essential to discovering the Hebrew Bible's consistent concepts of the soul. The key is to realize that all biblical souls were not created equal. Rather, each Hebrew soul term corresponds to one of the cosmic dominions from which it was created and to which it gravitates at the moment of passing. Man's link to the elements is as follows. Your body is earth, nephesh, water, ruach, wind, neshama, fire. So he goes right ahead and states that he's using ruach as wind and neshama as fire. Now, if you recall, Rabbi Kaplan said something to the effect of, well, on the one hand, neshama can mean breath. On the other hand, it can mean wind. And one of our difficulties was, like, what really is the difference between breath and wind? So here, Ethan Dor Shav is creating some pretty strong distinctions. Earth, water, wind, fire, body, nefesh, ruach, neshama. Okay, he's going to stick with neshama, meaning fire. And I have to say, he puts together a pretty good case. Not to be mistaken for material building blocks, as in the Aristotelian model. In the Bible, each element represents a realm of being. Man, and only man, exists simultaneously in all four realms. For man, therefore, each elemental soul represents a different way of existing as an I. So I just want to be careful here. He's not saying that we have four different souls. And I think he should have been clearer here. We have ace, not even ace soul. You'll see what he says, but it's not four different souls. In understanding the three soul terms distinctly, it becomes apparent that instead of an immature text, the Hebrew Bible proves to be philosophically acute, comprehensive, and revolutionary. Let us take each element in turn. First, the material element, earth. In the biblical worldview, earth represents man's physical body, the base component of our existence, preceding the three soul terms. On one level, the connection between earth and body is straightforward. The clay body is formed from the dust of the ground, and we'll see what that word dust really is. And upon death, it returns to the ground. For dust you are, and to dust you shall return. We're familiar with that. The Bible combines two terms to define the body, basar, generally translated as flesh, and etzem, the bone frame. Together they compose a twofold perception of the physique, characterized by the enduring skeleton and the soft tissue husk that it encases it. Even independently, basar and etzem are explicitly of earth. Job teaches that all flesh, basar, shall perish together, and man shall turn again into a far earth. And that psalmist says, my figure, etzem, it's me, was not hidden from you, as I was formed in secret, constructed in the bottoms of the earth. The great medieval linguist, the Ibn Ezra, stresses that bones, as the body's foundation, are of the earth and stand for earth. Formed from the ground, etzem and basar are a compound manifestation of this element. Now we call meat basar, but Hu notain lechem l'kol basar kilei elam chasto. If you remember that Tehillim, that is not talking about, that's talking about the biosphere. And lechem there is like the nourishment of the biosphere. We're not just talking about hamburgers and steaks here. Okay. And as the bones, you know, as a tree, it's the bones support the biological husk. But on a deeper level, we must note that the dust, an inadequate rendition of the Hebrew afar that we are created of, is anything but listless. Rather, it represents dark soil taken from a verdant earth. Indeed, the very root of afar likely relates to fruit and reproduction. He's saying that, like we say, Brei Pri Hagafen, he's saying that the shurish of the fruit is the same shurish as what we call dust. And fruitfulness is a much better characteristic of what the word means than just like lifeless dust. At the very least, many verses show it to be moist and fertile, and from another afar they will grow. Another quote, the word etzem for bones likewise connects to the idea of earth as the source of organic growth, since etzem is related to eitz, Hebrew for tree. Inside each of us, the Bible sees a growing tree, trunk and limbs, which gives form to our body. Pointedly, plants and not minerals are the children of the biblical earth. Here we discern a fundamental connection between the body and the sphere of earth and existence as an autonomous layer of the cosmos. Earth and dominion is outlined by the third day of creation. Before the introduction of animals, let the earth sprout grass, the herb yielding seed, and the fruit tree yielding fruit after its kind, whose seed is in itself upon the earth. By definition, then, earth is the sphere of growth and procreation. Our bodies make us too children of the earth. It is the body that grows, that produces sperm or ova, and thereby procreates. Being formed of soil does not debase us, therefore, but rather connects us to the entire botanic reality. Indeed, continuity of species through seeds, an exclusive third day theme, defines the very concept of organisms. Ultimately then, the earth element captures not inorganic matter, but the organic criterion, or what Aristotle would call our vegetative soul. This explains the body-plant analogy employed throughout the Hebrew Bible. Particularly, the same word zera denotes both the seed of plants and the seed of man. Likewise, he's now connecting terms that Tanakh uses to associate what we call the natural world with what people are, what humans are. Likewise, the word for fruit, pri, also describes children, fruit of the loin, and at least a half dozen other terms employ this parallel usage. Indeed, plant imagery is frequently employed to describe human physical existence and continuity. From Isaiah, there shall come forth a shoot from the trunk of Yishai. We know that's referring to Mashiach. Elsewhere in Isaiah, your bones shall flower like grass. From Yechezkel, I made you thrive like a plant in the field. From Tehillim, the righteous shall flourish like a palm tree. That we say that on Friday, you know, that's in the davening. I get the phrase, but we're familiar with that. More than merely poetic metaphors, these analogies point toward the core of the biblical worldview. The body, therefore, is far more than the clay vessel. Man, in some sense, is first of all a plant. It's self-growing, then wilting with age, and eventually returning to the earth, only to fertilize new growth. The material body marks our being as an organism. On this level of existence, each and every one of us is a seed of earth like the flowers and trees. And the elemental earth principle, as a sphere of generation and degeneration, explains the puzzling link within the first view of Ecclesiastes with which we opened. A generation goes and a generation comes because the earth stands forever. Our growing body, created of earth, is our share in this basic organic cycle of reality. And I just want to point out as we mentioned a few weeks ago, that there's a Ramban, Nachmanides' commentary on the creation story, and he talks at length about these meridians in the biosphere. He didn't use biosphere, in the earth, and the meridians have sustenance for different types of plants. And he mentions that Shlomo HaMelech, King Solomon, knew where to plant leeks in Canaan because he knew there was a meridian that extended to Africa, and he knew that that in Africa, that meridian was good for growing leeks, and the same meridian was present where he lived. So if this is the meridian for growing leeks, let's grow the leeks here on the meridian. He understood that there's these different meridians in the earth. So I asked an acupuncturist once, I said, and I told him that story. And I said, how do you think that relates to the ancient Chinese healers knowing about the meridians in our body? Goes, they understood that the human body was connected to the biosphere, and that these meridians in the earth go through us. That doesn't mean you plant leeks on your elbow, but what it does mean is that there's these meridians that connect us, our human body, to the earth. And here Ethan Shav has made a lot of connections using phraseology in Tanakh between phrases that refer to the earth and the plant sphere and human sphere. A connection here. Okay, so that is the first level, the plant level, the earth level. And next week, we're going to pick up the nephesh level, the water level. Okay, and I'm going to emphasize that this is a continuum. These are not four pieces. We're going to see how each part is connected to the other part. So stay tuned for that. Okay. Now, let's talk about the meditation with Bante. He's talking about dealing with distractions. Maneuver number 2, deep breaths. When your mind is wild and agitated, you can often reestablish mindfulness with a few quick, deep breaths. Pull the air in strongly and let it out the same way. This increases the sensation inside the nostrils and makes it easier to focus. Notice he's talking about breathing in and out through your nose and not the mouth. Make a strong act of will and apply some force to your attention. Concentration can be forced into growth, so you will probably find your full attention settling nicely back on the breath. So your mind follows the breath here, and if you're losing it, you can refocus. If you're losing your focus, you can losing your mind in the sense that it's wandering, getting distracted. It will immediately, breathing hard in and out, not crazy hard, but hard enough, will force your attention back where you want it, and you can go on meditating. Okay. Now, before we meditate, I want to share with you, this book, Stephen Siebold talks about the thought processes, habits, and philosophies of the great ones. And he has a chapter that says, champions avoid delusion. And he quotes Confucius here. And this is what Confucius says. And Confucius lived it 500 years BCE, 500 years, so he lived 2,600 years ago. He says, the wise men of antiquity, when they wished to make the whole world peaceful and happy, the whole world, first put their own states into proper order. They made America great again. Before putting their states into proper order, they regulated their own families. Before regulating their families, they regulated themselves. Before regulating themselves, they tried to be sincere in their thoughts. Before being sincere in their thoughts, they tried to see things exactly as they really were. So even down to the level where you're deciding what to think, you can't decide what to think until you know what your situation is. You need to know, you need to look at a reality, you need to look at reality objectively. Distance yourself from it. Now, why are we saying this? We're saying this because what do you think we're training to do in this meditation? What do you think is the skill that you're developing when you sit and you practice distancing yourself from the thought stream that just bubbles up from your subconscious? You are developing the skill at looking at things objectively. Now here, when you meditate and you're trying to minimize the influence